As you may already know, I am autistic. I already wrote about my experiences growing up with autism 2 different times. The first was through my Legacy series, which serves as both my quote-unquote origin story and as a spin-off of the Gauntlet series where I played the 12 most impactful games of my life. Well, 11 of the 12 because you can't really play Parappa the Rapper on anything but the original PS1 on an LCD TV. The other was for my family. That story, unfortunately for reasons beyond my control, can only be viewed on a website that I do not represent, nor does its views and opinions reflect my own, and that's just putting it politely. So I thought I'd take this MDi format to combine the 2 stories into one video to make the story of my autistic upbringing more seamless and accessible. Now, if you know me in real life, I may have a hard time coming up with the right words to say to someone. I may not look directly into your eyes when we talk to each other. I may be a little compulsive. Okay, I lied, I'm very compulsive. And I may come across as apathetic at the worst times. It's not entirely my fault. It's just part of who I am and part of my diagnosis, which didn't happen until I started college. However, I knew I was off long before I started college. Before starting elementary school, around either preschool or kindergarten, it was tough for me to communicate with anyone. I only know this because that is what my parents told me. I was told that I would often repeat the last thing spoken to me, not because I was a jerk, but because it was the only response I could think of. Back then, I was considered an echolaic, someone who could only communicate by copying what other people said to me. When I enrolled in elementary school, supposedly, I was told I wouldn't make it on my own without special education. So up until high school, I would be pulled out of class to either take a test or just to talk to special education teachers. I think what happened was that people assumed that I had ADHD. But this was the late 80s and early 90s, though. Hardly anyone, if anyone at all, knew what autism was. It's tough for me to recall my first couple of years in school, but I do remember a few things. My first word was airplane. My favorite toy was a plastic W that amused me when I would turn it upside down into an M. And I was able to learn the alphabet by watching Wheel of Fortune and Sesame Street. This little quirk helped me develop my reading and spelling skills faster than most of the kids in my classes, so I guess I had that going for me. But anyway, concepts weren't immediately understandable to me, and it was a struggle to figure out how I could maintain my focus long enough to comprehend direction. I liked interacting with objects, and I liked bright, noisy, and colorful images on the TV. So my parents had the bright assumption that the Nintendo system is exactly what I needed. It displayed bright, noisy, and colorful images on the television, and I could interact with it. I vaguely remember playing Super Mario Bros. And The Legend of Zelda, with my parents telling me how to play it and guiding me to my destinations. I don't think I got it at that point in life, but I was entertained enough to not dismiss it. It was interesting, but not fascinating enough to me. But one night, my dad purchased the 10-gen Miss Pac-Man, and he would spend every other night after work playing it. I must not have noticed right away because I do not remember how, where, or why my dad got the game in the first place. But for whatever reason, watching my dad play Miss Pac-Man every other night was the most fascinating experience I got out of that Nintendo system. My dad always played the Strange mode, a mode where every single maze was a different color and a different layout. He would play through the game until he ran out of continues. He kept playing and playing until he eventually conquered Strange mode. It was the first time I had ever seen a game played from beginning to end. It was also the first time I was ever even remotely invested in any video game. But having good reading skills and developing an interest in video games didn't exactly translate to social butterfly, and everyone will like you regardless of who you are. All my life, I've had a bit of an awkward personality. I didn't understand this when I was younger, so it was tougher for me to stand up for myself when I was bullied. A lot. Despite how I was treated, I always stayed true to myself. I wasn't going to conform, mainly because I couldn't see myself as anything other than a dork that played a lot of video games and watched anime and wrestling. I'm not a hermit though. I did hang out with friends and went on dates when I had the chance. And as long as I could be me, and not a vision of what someone else wanted me to be, I was content with life and its challenges. I didn't want my family or my teachers to dumb down anything for me my entire life. I mentioned earlier that I stopped going to special education classes when I started high school. That's because I wanted to see if I could do it. On my own. Simple as that. I appreciate what the special education teachers did for me. However, I couldn't let them hold my hand for the rest of my life. My mother understood this and respected my decision. I'm sure she could have insisted that I receive special education assistance, but she didn't. I think we both had to see how well I did on my own. And lo and behold, I graduated high school without special education classes. And I didn't stop there. I got my associate's and bachelor's degrees on my own, and when I am not MDi, I am an educator. And I have worked in education for over 10 years with every age group at least once. The moral of this story is that autistic people may have their weaknesses and setbacks, but they also have their strengths. People shouldn't assume how far someone with autism can go in life. Let them see how far they can go for themselves. Not saying special education isn't completely necessary. Just give them the free will to decide how much special education assistance they need. And never, ever let them feel like they need to be a completely different person. Embracing their strengths and interests can help them more than you think. I could say more, but it is tough to generalize this subject because not everyone is like me or has a family like me. But if you or someone you know has autism and you're not quite sure how to approach that, and you need someone to reach out to, you can always reach out to your pal MDi.